The house was quiet in a way that felt deliberate, like silence had been built into its bones. I arrived on a Thursday morning, the keys cold in my palm, handed over by my boss with a casual, "Make yourself at home. We'll be in Florence for 2 weeks." I'd never seen the house before, just heard him mention it in passing, the way people with money often do. It was larger than I expected, the kind of place that had a history of dinners with crystal glasses and family portraits that watched from the walls. For the first few days, I settled into the stillness. I fed the dog, watered the plants, and explored each room with the curiosity of someone trying to map someone else's life. The furniture was elegant but lived in. The bookshelves were alphabetized. The kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon and dish soap. In the evenings, I'd sit on the back porch and listen to the wind in the trees, letting it carry away pieces of the heartbreak I was still too proud to name. I didn't expect to see anyone, not until the family returned. That's why I froze when I heard the front door open on the third evening. I was halfway through slicing an apple in the kitchen, the dog already trotting to the entryway. My heart thudded once, sharp and immediate. I wiped my hands on a towel and stepped into the hallway. He was standing just inside the door, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver at his temples and a travel bag slung over one shoulder. His coat was wet at the shoulders, the kind of damp that comes from a long walk in light rain. His eyes, sharp but tired, met mine with a pause that said he wasn't expecting anyone either. "You must be," he asked, his voice low, calm, with something unreadable beneath it. "I'm house-sitting," I replied, clutching the towel tighter than I needed to. "For your son, I assume?" He nodded slowly. "I'm his father. I wasn't planning to stay long. Just needed to be here." I didn't know what to say to that, so I stepped aside and let him pass. He moved with a quiet familiarity, pausing in the hallway to look up at one of the family portraits. I stood a few feet behind him, unsure if I should offer coffee or pretend I didn't exist. That night we ate dinner at opposite ends of the table. We didn't say much. The house, suddenly no longer mine alone, felt different, alive maybe, or haunted. When he finally went upstairs, he paused on the steps and said, almost to himself, "Funny how quickly a place can stop feeling like home." I didn't sleep much that night. Something had shifted, and I wasn't sure if it was him or me. By morning, the rain had stopped, leaving behind a silvery sheen on the windows and the scent of damp earth. He was already in the kitchen when I came down, coffee brewing, sleeves rolled, barefoot. The easy domesticity of it unsettled me. He moved like someone who had once owned every corner of the house and wasn't sure if he still did. I figured, "We could both use it," he said, pouring 2 mugs without asking how I took mine. I thanked him, awkwardly, and leaned against the opposite counter. We sipped in silence, and for a while the only sound was the faint ticking of a nearby clock. He didn't ask questions, didn't pry, but there was something about the way he looked at me, as if he was trying to measure the weight of my presence. Over. The next few days, a quiet rhythm settled between us. He didn't leave the house much, and neither did I. We moved through shared spaces with careful grace, like dancers tracing invisible lines. Meals became a silent agreement. Sometimes I cooked, sometimes he did. It wasn't spoken, but we were no longer strangers. One afternoon, I found him in the library, sitting beneath a sunlit window with an old paperback in his hand. He looked up when I entered, then held the book out without a word. It was a novel I'd mentioned liking, its spine cracked and well-loved. I took it, sat across from him, and opened to the first page. We read in tandem, silence stretching between us like thread. In that stillness, he began to unravel, carefully. He spoke about his wife, my boss's mother, with the kind of reverence reserved for someone long gone in more ways than one. Their marriage had thinned over time, strained, by distance, by expectations, by things left unsaid. "We stopped speaking the truth," he said one evening, not looking at me. And eventually, silence became easier. I understood more than I admitted. When I told him about my last relationship, how it had ended with absence instead of words, he listened without judgment. There was no pity in his eyes, only recognition. We were, in our own ways, abandoned men trying not to drown in the quiet that followed. On the 5th night, we sat on the porch again, this time side by side. The cicadas hummed in the distance, and the heat of the day clung to the air. He passed me a glass of wine and said softly, "Sometimes people don't betray you by lying. They do it by pretending they're fine when they're already gone." I didn't know how to answer that. But I nodded because I felt it too, how betrayal isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it just slips in unnoticed, wearing the face of love. He didn't touch me. Not yet. But something had shifted again, just beneath the surface. And I wasn't sure how long we could pretend nothing was there. The storm came suddenly, as if summoned by something neither of us had said aloud. Thunder cracked across the sky while the rain poured in heavy, determined sheets, blurring the garden beyond the windows. The lights flickered once, then went out entirely, leaving the house swathed in dim candlelight and the scent of ozone. We found ourselves in the living room, both of us too alert to sleep, too restless to pretend otherwise. He lit a few candles and placed them around the room with quiet precision. His movements were slow, deliberate, like he was warding off ghosts. I sat on the floor beside the couch, legs folded, the wine from dinner still warm in my veins. Music played low from his phone, something old and melancholic with a voice like smoke. He didn't speak for a long time, and neither did I. We simply existed, side by side in a hush that had become oddly intimate. Then, without ceremony, he sat beside me, close but not touching. The kind of closeness that hums with the question of what happens if neither of us pulls away. "I shouldn't have come back," he murmured. I turned to look at him. "Why did you?" He hesitated. "Because something in me hoped it would still feel like home." His words settled between us like dust. I saw the hurt in his posture, in the tight set of his jaw, the way his eyes didn't quite meet mine. He wasn't just trying to reclaim a space. He was trying to find himself in it again, and maybe I was doing the same, in a different way. Then it happened, slowly, without warning. His hand found mine, warm, steady, unshaking. I froze for a moment, waiting for guilt or shame or panic to arrive, but none of those came. Just a deep, aching clarity. He leaned in, his breath soft against my skin, and kissed me. It was nothing like I expected. No hunger, no rush, just something fragile and desperate, like a man remembering how to feel. I kissed him back because it felt honest, because it felt like we both needed to. But even as we parted, I knew something irreversible had taken place. He pulled away first, eyes flickering with conflict. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm not," I said, though the words trembled. He stood, suddenly distant, and disappeared upstairs without another word. I remained on the floor, the weight of what had happened pressing down like the storm itself. That night I didn't sleep. The house, once a refuge, now felt like a threshold, one we had both crossed without knowing how to return. And still, a part of me waited to see if morning would bring him back down the stairs. The morning. Sun filtered through the curtains with a deceptive warmth, casting long stripes of gold across the hardwood floor. I lingered in the kitchen, every motion deliberate. Coffee brewed too slowly, toast left untouched. The silence of the house was thicker now, different from the quiet I had once found comforting. It was expectant, like the walls themselves were, holding their breath. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. He entered quietly, still barefoot, hair slightly disheveled. His eyes met mine with the same hesitation that had hung in the air since the moment we kissed. He didn't say good morning. He didn't need to. There was nothing ordinary left between us. He reached for a mug, poured himself coffee, and leaned against the counter beside me. The space between our bodies felt charged, but neither of us moved. It was too early for confessions, and too late for denial. I didn't sleep, he admitted, voice rough. Me neither, I said. A long pause followed. Then he spoke again, softer now. What happened last night? It wasn't planned. I know. But it wasn't meaningless either. That sentence cracked something open in both of us. He looked at me then, really looked, like he was trying to memorize the lines of someone who had become unexpectedly important. I wanted to ask what this meant, what came next. But the words wouldn't come. And maybe that was for the best. Instead, we walked together into the garden, the morning damp still clinging to the grass. He paused beneath the old oak tree, running a hand along its gnarled bark. I used to bring my son here when he was little, he said. He'd climb so high. It terrified his mother, but he always came down smiling. There was no bitterness in his voice, just memory. I stood beside him and asked the question I hadn't dared to the night before. Why did you really come back? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, because I felt empty and I didn't know where else to go. I nodded. I understood that kind of emptiness too well. The sound of his phone vibrating in the house pulled us both back. He glanced toward it but didn't move. They'll be home tomorrow, he said finally. We both know this can't follow them. Through that door. No, I agreed, though it hurt more than I expected. He turned to me, eyes clouded. But it doesn't mean it didn't matter. We stood like that, two men caught in a space between longing and goodbye. Then he reached for my hand one last time, just long enough for me to feel the warmth of it and let it go. By the time I left the next day, the house felt the same as when I arrived, but I wasn't, and I carried him with me, quietly, painfully, tenderly, in the space between memory and something almost like love.